Okay, welcome everybody. This is, I believe, the fourth recording of our podcast. And today we have Aaron Furphy, who's going to talk to us a little bit about risk management. Known Aaron, I'm trying to think now, how many years we've known each other? Trying to, how many is that? Eight
Must
years,
be.
maybe more,
It's
must be
close,
more, maybe
close
closer to
to
10.
10. Yeah,
Yeah, it must be about 10.
yeah.
So, okay. It's been good. So if you want to
Time
introduce
flies.
yourself, Aaron. It does. Yeah, I wouldn't say we're having fun
Yeah.
though.
So no. uh, yeah. So my name's Aaron Furphy. I'm the owner and principal consultant of More Management Systems. Uh, Mainly supporting businesses going through their ISO journeys, going for certification. Just looking to improve the way these systems are implemented into businesses, making sure that they actually work for the organizations rather than just being a tick box exercise. You know, just sort of providing value for the business at the end of the day, making sure that they're getting what they want out of it, at the same time.
I say you're in Northern Ireland, just in case people were sort of
Yeah,
wandering on
you,
the
you can get
accent.
the you
Yeah.
can get the you can get the subtitles put up after once you do the editing, so you can.
Didn't think of that actually. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
What standards do you do? You do the 9001,
yeah.
14001, I
So
believe, and then you do the AS 9100.
yeah, 45,001 as well, and also support businesses going for Cyber Essentials certification as well, related to MOD standards. So it's not essentially 27,001, but yeah, and I also provide strategic management consultancy as well, helping businesses plan ahead, get a proper strategy, 5-year strategy in place, and also a bit of business mentoring as well.
Yeah, I suppose that's where you differ a little bit to other consultants, isn't it? Because you do
Yeah,
specialize a little bit in that strategic planning, don't you? That's kind of I
yeah,
think that's the bit you love the most, I guess, isn't it?
yeah. It's all about how helping businesses grow, really, and to grow in a sustainable fashion. Not that it's uncontrolled growth, and that this is hence why we're talking about risk today. Is that a lot of places have ambitions, to grow their businesses, but they don't properly evaluate the risks that could potentially appear during that time period, where it be a 3 or 5 year period. And sometimes just taking the right approach towards risk can help alleviate some of the pain while you're going through them growth spurts in business.
Yeah, because I think some people, when we sort of talk about risk management in the standards, they often just focus on the risk around the standard, but not so much on where they're going and the strategy behind that, isn't it? It's quite an important.
Yeah. Well, in the standards, it does say about PESTLE. Well, it doesn't actually say about PESTLE and SWOT, but it says about evaluating your internal and external factors of the business. So obviously that would be the best approach to begin with, is, recognizing your strengths, weaknesses, any opportunities and threats to the business as a simple tool. And then obviously looking at PESTLE, then just looking at the wider external factors to the business as well, and just coming up really with a plan on how to mitigate any of them risks, going forward.
So some people may not know what a PESTLE is. So what's a PESTLE?
Yeah. It's evaluating political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental. I think I got that right. Factors within the business. Or, yeah, yeah, it is.
Yeah, because I think some people put on the end sort of CM and things like that, don't they, for competition and think marketing and
Yeah,
things like that. I think when people do their
but
PESTLE,
that's where, like,
yeah,
yeah, the opportunities and threats that are identified within the SWOT analysis can also cover them easily. But yeah, it's weird because whenever you go into organizations, everyone has a great plan on how to grow the business or have great ambitions for the business. But, you know, whenever you look back in certain places, there might be employees leaving organizations because they feel like there might be like mismanagement and stuff like that, or maybe the leadership isn't there in the business, but people feel like these problems are pushed upon them. what I try and do is say to place, because I work with a lot of SMEs, small, medium-sized businesses, that, in order to retain staff, it's best to let them know what's coming or what the potential consequences are going forward in the business, so that everybody is sort of prepared on how to handle these problems whenever they appear. That could be anything from just doing an implementation project to carrying out, a strategic plan for growth. But it's one of them things that are kind of, I feel, looked over by some businesses, and that's probably why from I think it was a 2008 version of the 9001 standard, that risk is very rarely used in it. It was very much a mindset of correct and prevent the problem. That was the main sort of emphasis on how to, continually improve a business, whereas risk is considerably, or mentioned considerably more in the 2015 version of 9001, because they've realised that, you need to plan ahead, realise what risks you could face as a business. And once you have them mitigated from an early stage, then it's just a matter of just keep the cogs turning and just follow the plan as it says on the page or document or whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't think many people sort of realised what happened to preventive action in the 2008 version, do they? It was there, but it was never treated right. People always saw preventive as an afterthought. And then they sort of said, okay, well, we need to scrap this. So they took it out from a preventive action wording and they just put it into risk at the front, didn't they? That's basically what they've done with the standard 2008 to 2015. And I think that confused a lot of people. They were like, oh, where's preventive action gone? You've got to fix problems. Yeah, but preventive action wasn't never intended to be an after. It was always a before.
Yeah.
So just really emphasised that, haven't they, in the 2015 version? Which makes more sense, and, really.
Whenever you look back, like I remember the transition from the 2008 to 2015, they were sort of going, the terms got changed to corrective action and correction, which I still think in my head as a corrective and preventive action. But yeah, it was hard to get my head around it at the start. But whenever you're actually utilising the standard and sort of going through the motions with it, you actually do see the benefit in doing it. Like the amount of improvements that whenever I was in the quality management profession, I really enjoyed it because a lot of the improvements that came from it were very tangible to the business, like reducing cost of quality down. That was one of the big contributors to one of the places where I worked, where we were into 6 figures worth of scrap and managed to reduce that down to 5 figures over a period of 14 months. So utilising that risk-based thinking or the risk-based methodology, it does help.
So just purely by sort of implementing risk-based thinking, you got it down, you reduced it that much, did you?
Yeah, well, it was well over, I'd say, 60% of a contributing factor. There were other things that we done, but we managed to bring a team of all people across the whole organisation together to say, right, well, what are the problems that you've faced in the last 12 months? What are the things that are hindering you in your job? What do you see happening in the industry or in the supply chain or wherever it may be? What are the problems do you feel like you're going to face in the next 12 months? And actually sitting down and doing a full risk assessment on everything that they'd mentioned and prioritising them risks. And it gave you an action plan at the end. And it also gave you, if there was stuff to do with supply chain, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, like, you knew that, say, one of the mill PRF standards for anodizing was going to change, that you knew that change was going to happen. So to get ahead of the game, go and inform yourself on the updates of that new change to see if it'll have any knock-on consequences to, say, your aesthetic look to the parts, or the throughput of the parts, or the cost of the parts, so that you could then sit down and make a really good judgment on whether that risk was going to be major or not to your product going forward.
Okay. So do you think organisations don't generally do risk-based thinking properly then?
Yeah, it's a bit of a yes and a no answer. So I believe that we have, it's a human instinct that we evaluate risk on a daily basis with our lives. But, whenever you go into businesses, it sometimes mightn't be the priority. It's usually, right, get the throughput. We have targets to meet in terms of, say, invoice runs and stuff like that, that takes a back seat or may not be given the same level of priority. All you have to do is go back to your childhood as such, and we were always learning through trial and error, learning through mistakes. And then suddenly, once you become an adult, you've sort of learnt your lessons. So you start to become a bit more risk adverse, in adulthood. That's because you're sort of looking at things like security. There may be things like fear of failure and things like that. So I do believe that we all possess the capabilities, because we've all lived through it, to actually evaluate risk effectively. But I just feel like in some places it is a second thought.
So I think when people are implementing management systems, they sometimes leave risk management to one of the last things to implement. But really, it should be one of the first things they implement. Is that, what's your thinking on that?
Yeah, I would definitely say that that's one of the first things that I focus on with the business. It's not that I follow it clause by clause whenever I go through the implementation stages, but Section 4, doing the context of the organisation, it automatically sort of feeds into a risk assessment on the organisation and its external factors as well. So that is one of the main things that I would do whenever I go in to implement these standards into businesses. So it sort of allows the client to see, right, here's the mindset that we're going for throughout the implementation, and hopefully this will be the mindset that will continue throughout the life cycle of this management system as it grows and continues to evolve or continually improve, as they say.
Do you find it sometimes hard to convince business leaders that risk management's a good thing and how to do it properly? Or, do you get some reluctance?
Not necessarily, no. I do feel like once I actually sit down and explain it to the client and the importance of it and where the benefits are in doing it, they seem to be completely on board. I've never actually come across where someone has objected to doing one. It's just getting people in that certain mindset. Believe it or not, it's actually the organisations which have, say, like a design department, and they might be designing their own products. Well, straight away they're going to be doing failure mode effect analysis reports and things like that on their products before they get them released or before they go for CE marking. So them guys are almost like the ones who I would almost put together as like a risk team within the business, because they already understand the principles behind it and the reasons why they're doing it. So the only difference is with, say, a risk assessment for ISO 9001, obviously you do product risks and stuff like that through Section 8.3 on the design, but I'm talking more organisational risks here. So, yeah. So that, like, guys, I would sort of inflate their ego a bit. I don't want to be giving away the trade secrets, but if you inflate their ego a bit and say, look, well, this here is going to contribute highly to the profitability and sustainability of the business going forward. Sometimes the guys sit up a bit more straight in their seats and they're kind of like going, oh, flip, well, I've got this responsibility, which is good in a way.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's sort of go back a little bit. So obviously, how would an organisation go about approaching the risk management, or how do you sort of approach it with organisations when you're going in and setting up the system from a front end high level risk perspective? What's the starting block for everyone?
Yeah, so like I said, you carry out a SWOT, maybe a PESTLE, and then you would start to evaluate, right, but what are the problems that you're having operationally within your supply chain, with HR, all them type of things, and just come up with a list, first of all, about the potential problems that you could face. Uh, uh, it's a simple enough tool to use where it's quite common. You look at the likelihood of the problem and the severity of the problem. So usually they're scored like 1 to 5, not severe, highly severe, whatever it may be. But one of the things that I actually do as well, which as a consultant, I tend not to use my opinion in a lot of things that I do. I like to, supply whatever it is that I'm giving to the client with objective evidence on the reasons why I'm doing it that way. And one of the things that I spotted during COVID was whenever the government were evaluating the risk on the population, their risk calculation, if you want to call it that, it followed the same thing where they were looking at likelihood and impact, but their calculation was likelihood times impact, add likelihood again, because it doesn't matter how unsevere the impact is on the business. If it's something that's going to be happening often, so it's likely to happen and it's going to happen frequently, then you're still going to have a closer, well, what's the word? You're still going to have to manage it closely. You just can't go, right, well, the likelihood is a 5, but the impact's a 1. So, look, we'll just deal with it whenever it happens. You're better off having a plan. So, with the calculation, you're basically given like a 5x5 grid, and it's usually like a red, amber, green. So, green being good, yellow being medium, red being high risk. So then you apply management controls dependent on whether it's a low, medium, or high risk. So the calculation that I use, I've just taken it obviously from the government, but I have found it to be very beneficial because it's sometimes them wee small ones that keep reoccurring that you're going pain in the arse really. But at least if you've got a plan in place, it's just a matter of going, right, well, follow the plan. What does the plan say to do? And then that just takes the pain, the stress, and everything away from the organisation.
That's a good point, actually. So even if it could be a little niggly problem that happens all the time, doesn't cause a big problem, but why not nip it in the bud? Instead of focusing on the big stuff all the time. That's a good point. Never thought of it that way, actually.
Yeah, and like you could say, right, well, why don't you go down the preventive route and prevent that problem from happening again? But sometimes there is things external to the organisation which they just have no control of. So there's only so much you can do, really. But obviously the first thing you always try and do is prevent it from occurring or reoccurring. But in instances where you might not be able to do that, well then it's just close management and having that plan in place will help things greatly for the business.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because I suppose that's where the PESTLE comes into it, doesn't it? It brings in the external factors like the environment and technology and things like that. So, which you're right, you can't do something about some of those things, can you? They're just totally external.
Yeah, like for example, it does my head in the amount of updates I get on my phone on a weekly, monthly basis. And say it was a work phone that had a specific software or some sort of security feature on it, which then had to be reprogrammed each time that security update was released by, say, Android or Apple, that, you can't really phone up Google or you can't really phone up Apple and go, hey, boys, knock it on the head here. I'm trying to run a business here, So it's them kind of things, that you would be having a close management plan in place, so in that case, you might talk to whoever your IT provider is and say, look, do you have foresight in what these updates might be? Is there any way that we could improve this software in the background so that the updates don't affect it? Or maybe you could say, right, well, we need a dedicated person within that IT company to basically be reactive for our business. As soon as an update comes in, they need to be on it,
Yeah, makes sense. So thinking about the SWOT then, it's obviously strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. With risk-based thinking, would you do something about the strengths and opportunities, or do you just focus on the sort of the threats and the weaknesses?
Yeah, I would focus on the weaknesses and threats. It depends what the opportunities are, really. If it was, say, an acquisition or something like that of another business, you then would carry out a risk assessment, even though that may be an opportunity for your business. It just depends on the type of opportunity that presents itself. Your strengths are your strengths, so they should be the things that are reducing risks in your business as well. And then, like I said, the threats, you have to try and mitigate any risks on your business externally, and weaknesses, internal, risks. That could be competencies, it could be location, could be things like that you can actually change as a business. So yeah, weaknesses will tend to lead to problems in the future. So having a risk assessment done for them will help ease any pain that you may face further down the line.
So are you saying you sort of take the weaknesses and the threats and you risk, because obviously when you do a SWOT, you're just kind of bullet pointing sort of high level. So you're saying you then take those and you risk assess those individually to see which ones you need to tackle and which ones you can, I wouldn't say comfortably live with, but set them aside for the time being.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's one of them things. If you have threats to your business, that could be, obviously the first thing that comes to mind is competitors and stuff like that. That yes, there's nothing exactly that you can do to stop your competitor winning business over you. The only thing you can do is maybe work on your marketing. It could be improving your product or service, carrying out market analysis and seeing, right, what are the trends showing here in the industry. There was a period there about 5 or 6 years ago that whenever I was in the engineering industry, that, people were worrying about the metallic parts were going to automatically become composite parts because they were going to be lightweight, had better performance factors and things like that. But ultimately then in a few years down the line, they decided to still stay with metallics, not only because it was still cost effective, but now that the whole green agenda is out there now and it's being pushed more on businesses, that, metal's recyclable at the end of the day. So that is a better contributing factor than a single-use plastic going out there. So that's some of the things. Yes, the threats can be a threat at that time, but ultimately they can just turn into an opportunity just like that.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, I've got a client that was similar, that they were doing all composites and things like that, and they were worried about these new ones coming on board, but they never ever came about because this actually was better. The lightweight and the way they manufacture it as well was, much easier and things like that. There's more things added to it. I think people get confused about plastic. It's not plastic's bad, it's the single-use plastic. Plastic in the right context is excellent. Used in the right environment is nothing better than it, So I think people do get a little bit misled by that. So who should kind of get involved in the risk-based thinking, risk management elements of a management system? Is it just the leaders, or is it everyone, or a few different people, champions? How would you approach that?
What I generally tend to do is I would get like a team together, and it would consist mostly of members of the leadership team. I would almost give them tasks to do prior to coming into their meetings. So one of the approaches is go and speak to your staff. So, some businesses run like a letterbox sort of program, to suggest improvements and things like that. They could utilize something like that in their departments to say, right, here's the problems that our staff are currently facing. What are we looking at here? Is it something external to the business? Is it something internal? And then the manager will basically capture a list of these problems for each of their departments, and also add in their own stuff as well from a higher level, and then bring that into the meeting. And then we can start to really knuckle down and see, right, what is the severity? What is the likelihood? Or what's the impact? What's the likelihood? And then you can work collectively on mitigating factors. So how do you mitigate that risk? How do you lower that risk level down? And how do you manage it going forward? Because, sometimes I've been prone to it myself, is you just have tunnel vision sometimes in your own department, and it takes that person from, say, supply chain or sales, whatever it may be, to actually point out the obvious to you as well. I've found it beneficial in the past because I have been in a few different areas of business. And whenever I was working in sales, a lot of people go, I'll speak to other salespeople and find out what they're doing. That works to a certain degree, but whenever my target was a procurement department within another business, I had one at my disposal in my own business. So I went to speak to them to find out where's the pointers here? How can I get my point across? What sort of things are they looking for in the industry, and how to approach talking to someone from that kind of procurement background. So sometimes it's about the way you think of things as well.
Yeah, it's very true, because people see risk very differently. What's risky to me won't be risky to you. And yeah, I think it's good to get a collective group of people from different areas of the business together, just to, like you say, just go through things, because how they perceive something could be totally different, and get other ideas in place as well on how to mitigate things. So yeah, it's a good approach. Yeah. So if someone's going through a big strategic change, yeah, I don't know, let's just pick, maybe going into a brand new sector. I don't know, let's just say they're general manufacturing, and just going on to a bit of our background, they're then moving into the aerospace sector. That could be a massive risk to an organisation, couldn't it? So, how would you sort of approach those type of big strategic thinking risks? Is it the same way, or you do something slightly different?
I do I do approach it the same way, but I also bring my past experience with me into them conversations. So you would talk to the client and say, look, what's your expectations on this? First of all, to sort of gauge if they're realistic or not. I would always say it just depends on who you know. Sometimes if you're in there and you've got a contact, fair play, you're probably going to get in quicker than, a guy off the street who's just started a precision engineering business. But say you are that guy who's just started a business and is looking to move into that sector, you have to give yourself a certain period of years to carry out your networking, to get recognized within the industry, and also to give yourself time to implement the standards, which also open up them gates, for to get in with the big companies. But you need to have a realistic expectation of time whenever it comes to them things. If you are a business and going into a new sector, it could be, medical device or aerospace, that you can't just say, well, we have a business that's half a mile down the road from one of the leading brands. We need to actually provide more value to the client and prove why we're going to get the work, as opposed to the people who are currently doing it for them. So the first thing that you would try and do is identify, right, what are the problems that company is facing? So you need to solve a problem. It's always easier to sell a solution than just a service. So trying to inform yourself, doing market research and looking at businesses and saying they could have, because you're never going to know for sure unless you have insider information. But if you can sort of gauge it and say, look, well, these are the sort of problems that I think they're going to face, well, then you can apply improvements to your products and services, which will meet them needs at a future time. So it's an easier sell. You go, look, if you're going to think about this as a problem in 2 years' time, come and see us, and we'll take that pain away. And I'd say that's always the start for any of my clients that would be going into new industries, such as medical device and aerospace. So it's not so much about, oh, I've got these nice fancy new machines, I've got the best human resources on the job. Generally, they want to know, is it going to be good quality? Is it going to be on time? And is it solving any of my problems?
Yeah, people they sometimes don't like to change just for the sake of it, do they? Sometimes if it's not broken, we won't fix it and they'll just leave it. So you trying to convince someone that come to us, we're better. Well, in what way? I've got no problems. It's a very good point. I think some people get the standards and think it's like a magic wand. Yeah, we've got aerospace. Right, wait for all this work to come flooding in. It just doesn't happen, does it? You've got to work at it.
No.
I think that's something people do overlook,
It does take a lot of networking as well. It goes back to the old saying, your network is your net worth. And I'm a big believer in that. Whenever I started my business, that's what I was just out doing the first couple of months, was just networking, going to any face-to-face networking events I could go to, just purely off the basis that word of mouth travels fast across Northern Ireland as well. And you never know who you could bump into at some stage, along the way. And that's basically how my business started off for me. Was the first couple of clients I got were just through word of mouth that I got through these networks.
Did you do a risk assessment on your business before you embarked?
Yeah, sad enough as that sounds, like, yeah,
practice what you preach.
No, my wife would laugh at this one, like, but I'm a sad sort of person that would sit at night, come up with an idea, and I go, flip, that'd be a brilliant idea. So I'll sit on the laptop, do up a wee quick business plan, look at the potential risks to it. 9 times out of 10, they all get through in the bin. So they do, but she's like, oh, flip, he's off on one again, so he is,
Oh, it's brilliant.
But yeah, whenever I was in university, like, I actually went and done the Go For It program and stuff like that. I was very proactive in pursuing a career. I always knew what I wanted, and that was to own my own business and to work within the standard sort of industry, whether that be certification or consultancy, or auditing. And, whenever when was that? I must have been 21 and done the Go For It program, where I got a business plan developed for me with the help of a consultant, got a full risk assessment carried out, and then got a logo and stuff made up, bought the domain, and then done nothing with it for about 6 or 7 years. And then once I sort of knew that the time was right, that's where I sort of pressed the button and away I went. And, having that foundation of a business plan and a risk assessment carried out, it did help, even if it was, it wouldn't be to the detail of what I'd carry out for my clients now, but just having something small at least was better than nothing. It's like they say, half a loaf's better than no loaf. So
yeah, good. So what if people don't do risk management properly? Risk-based thinking. What's some of the big pitfalls that they can fall into? Or have you got any real bad stories where someone hasn't done it properly, and what's happened?
Yeah, well, there's a few things, because I do a bit of work as well in CE marking and stuff, and it's one of the key elements to certifying a product within the EU under their regulations. And it they don't grasp that the CE marking is about the safety of the product. So you have to evaluate everything to do with that product. But the guy who owned the business, he came from a background where he had ultimate knowledge of this product that he was designing and manufacturing. So he felt like, I'll throw a few things down on a page and that'll do me. But it's one of these things with CE marking, because you're dealing with regulations. You have to do it to the nth degree, because you have to keep telling yourself, what if something drastically went wrong? So say there was a fatality with using my product. Could I stand in court and show the judge that, if you want to call it back of a fag packet, that I drew these risk assessments on? So that would never stand up. And this is one of the key things as well, which I learned whenever I went out on my own, is that there are international standards out there for different products that go on to market that require additional safety factors evaluated. So my sort of advice would be to, if you are that person and you're maybe looking at bringing a product to market, is to just type in the type of product that it is that you're making and write ISO or something like that at the end of it, and do a Google search and see if it brings up any standards. Standards can be very expensive, talking maybe a couple of grand or whatever, but you could be, if you have access to a library or they might be able to give you access to it for a certain period of time, or just a view. And that way you can then see, because within them standards, they'll tell you all the different factors that you have to evaluate of that product, and it's specific to your product. So it sort of takes the guessing work out. But it's also very good from a design perspective, because it'll probably highlight stuff that you might oversee. I don't want to go into too much detail about the product or the client, but there was a few things that were missing from their product that were key to the safety of it. And if they had actually sold any of their product, it would have resulted in a costly product recall, because it just would have been very, very, unsafe. There are other areas as well then of operational risk. Generally, they're a bit less tangible, so they are, just to realize. But thinking back, I haven't really come across many of my clients that have had any severe sort of pitfalls whenever it comes to managing their risk, apart from obviously the CE mark and stuff. But it's like I said, whenever you're dealing with regulations and legislation, you always have to say to yourself, right, if I'm in a courtroom scenario here, will it hold up? So that could be applicable to the ISO 14000 and 45000 standards, where you are dealing directly with legislation and compliance to legislation. You always have to say, right, well, yes, you have to comply to a standard, but, put yourself in the shoes of a lawyer or solicitor and say, can I stand behind this and go, yep, I'm safe? And if you can't, well, then it's a key indicator that it's not right, or it's wrong, or it might need additional work.
I've actually used like AI fairly recently for things like that, and I've put in whatever the product or sector, I can't remember now, sector was that I was auditing in. I said, give me the standards that are applicable to this sector type thing, and it spits them out. And it's a good tool. There's a lot of stuff out there that can help you sort of determine things like that. Definitely.
Yeah, he's a great job.
It is. I'm trying to think where we were without it now.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Cool. Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to add as a last minute sort of thought or tip on how the organisation should manage the risk or risk-based approach?
I'd say just always look at the examples that you find online. And I don't mean by Jimmy down the road. Like, look at, government agencies, look at public sector bodies and stuff like that. These people are held to account more than sometimes the public sector, or sorry, the private sector. So if you can find examples online like that, try them out and see what way they work. I'd say the best thing to do is just go back into your business and carry out a SWOT analysis. And don't really worry too much about the PESTLE. The SWOT is enough to get you going at the start, and it'll highlight the sort of the key risks that you feel are on your business at the minute, and just following the simple scoring methodology of, say, a 1 to 5 on severity of risk and the impact of risk. I think I've done that the whole way through this podcast, and the likelihood of the risk as well, and just start scoring these problems. Get an extra person, bring the wife in if that's what it takes, or the husband, and get their view on it too. It's always good to get a second person's opinion on things too, and from there then you'll have a plan. And it doesn't have to be a massive like business continuity type risk assessment, but at least that will get you started.
Okay, cool, great. Well, we appreciate your time. Is there anything, how can people get hold of you if they want to get in touch with you?
Yep. So if you want to get in touch with me, you can look me up on LinkedIn. There's not many people on LinkedIn called Aaron Furphy with that surname, so you should be able to easily find me. And if not, you can find all my contact details as well on my website at www.mournms.com.
And Mourne is Mourne.
N-E.
N-E, yeah.
Yeah. Mourne, it's the Mourne Mountains.
Mourne Mountains.
It's
yeah,
not
I know
morbid
that.
or anything
yeah.
like that.
Yeah. I knew about the Mourne Mountains, but some of the people may not have. Yeah. So that's great.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time.
No problem.
Yeah, we'll do another one day.
Yeah.
Good.
Look forward to it, Mike. Thanks very much for having us on.
It's been good. Been very helpful. So hopefully everyone's found that beneficial. If you'd like to like or subscribe, that'd be great, either on YouTube or we're on Spotify, iTunes, or Apple Podcasts, I think they're called. Many different sources we're trying to get out there. But any likes or follows are very beneficial to us, so we'd appreciate anyone giving that a go. Okay, and then we'll catch everyone shortly.